Right. Welcome to Fazlifts episode 5. This is all about the placebo effect. Right. So thank you for joining me. I've actually written down some bullet points for this one. So I'll be interested to hear whether this turns out better or worse than previous podcasts with a little bit of structure. Normally I just sort of free flow. So be interested to see how it goes. But I've been wanting to do this podcast for quite a while because it's very relevant to bodybuilding. It's very relevant to fitness in general. It's very relevant just to the average Gen Pop person who's looking at getting a boost and is looking to supplements to provide that boost. So today is all about the placebo effect. I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on why my default stance on the supplement industry and new supplements is one of skepticism, and why yours should be too. I'm going to cover a 4-step process on how I believe the supplement industry thrives. And then, I've got a couple of studies to talk through with you, which are really interesting. So let's get started. So firstly, why am I so suspicious of the supplement industry? Well, this is why, and this is why I think you should be too. Supplement industry is a roughly $25 billion industry, turns over that much. And I've watched products come and go over the last 20 years. I've watched the same people struggle with their body weight, their body image. And I've watched the turnover of people who just in general look at fitness, trying to get the edge with supplementation. And in general, most of the supplements have turned out to be, I can safely say, over the last 20 years, probably 95% of the supplements which were sold have turned out to be just absolutely useless. And have just burnt a hole in the wallets of people buying them. Now, I remember 20 years ago, things like, if some of the older guys and girls remember this, do you remember Google Strones? I think that's how you pronounce it. It was supposed to be increase your thyroid to the point where weight would just kind of fall off you. I remember this being described to me at a health and fitness shop in town when I was like, I don't know, 19, 20, and the guy was just saying, yeah, your fat's just going to fall off you. It's literally, it was what he was saying, like, your fat's going to melt off you, it's going to fall off you with this product. And it was something like £50 a month for this product, which it's not even, it was that bad, like it was that pointless, it was that useless. It's not even sold anymore. and there are tons of products like that, which aren't even sold anymore because they're so ridiculous. And so pointless that just nobody's fooled anymore. And there are dozens and dozens of those types of products which have just fallen by the wayside over the years because they were always useless. But they were all touted as being amazing to begin with. And people spent money on them. Somebody out there made millions on, these products like Google Strones. Somebody out there made millions. But they're so somebody out there is sitting on millions that they've made from these products which are just total shit and just don't work. So just let that sink in for a second. So that feeds a little bit into my skepticism. So one of the things that I put out there recently on Facebook, I was asked a question about CBD oil, and somebody was interested in saying, well, let's look at some of the other benefits, all that kind of stuff. And I wrote a fairly long post detailing the sort of a 4-step process on how I think the supplement industry thrives. And so this is what I said. Point number 1, you get a study which comes out saying a new product like these Google Strones, it says that it has some sort of beneficial effect. It might be a minuscule beneficial effect, but some sort of beneficial effect. And usually it's in some sort of extreme population, like the elderly, the starving, or the diseased. Some sort of population which has no relevance to your average guy or girl who lives a healthy lifestyle and trains 4 to 6 days a week. Okay. Second point is the media picks up on this and they start talking about it. And it's usually overblown. So the effect size is overblown, and it usually comes out with new supplement cures this or this. Okay. Third thing that happens is a supplement company then decides to take advantage of this, take advantage of you, essentially. and it comes out with a product supporting this for the general population of bodybuilders. So they're supporting this new supplement, saying it's going to have a great effect on you. You're in the healthy population of people who go to the gym, and are relatively healthy for most part. And so we have this situation here where the original study was based on a different population, so extreme population, like the elderly, starving, and diseased. This supplement company comes out and says it's going to benefit you. That's the third step. Then the fourth step, we see ambassadors appear on social media purporting the benefits. And they're like, yeah, great. This product like CBD oil, it has a fantastic effect. I sleep better, all that kind of stuff. And these guys are also prone to the placebo effect. So in those four basic points, that is how the supplement industry has thrived all these years. Firstly, misinterpreted studies. And secondly, the placebo effect. That basically sums up how people are able to make tons of money in the supplement industry and rip you guys off, essentially. That's what they're doing. And I wanted to word it in that way, to say rip you guys off, because I really want to place the emphasis here on and to move away from the idea that the supplement industry is there to help you. It's not. Okay? It's not there to help you at all. It's there to make money off you. And their track record over the last 20 years has been to make money off you from products that generally don't work. So pretty much everything apart from protein, creatine, caffeine, and maybe one or two other supplements, pretty much everything aside from those are a bust. And as I say, there are dozens of supplements which I heard of back when I first started lifting, which aren't even on the market now because they're just so bad and they've been debunked so hard. It's interesting to see the backlash at BCAAs recently as well. We've seen some robust research which shows that BCAAs are just pretty much pointless. And people are just starting to see that now. And I'm quite hopeful that with that type of research coming out, people will start to become more skeptical. But unfortunately, that's not the case just yet. I shared something about CBD oil recently on my Instagram, and that got a lot of backlash. And I suppose it didn't really surprise me. I had a message from a client of mine, Jack, if you're listening, who said, we're going to prepare to ruffle some feathers with this CBD post, which I thought was quite funny. But yeah, I got quite a lot of backlash on that, and it did seem the overwhelming number of people had seen one or two studies or whatever, and the general feeling was, we're going to approach this positively. We're going to take the default stance that, yeah, this stuff works, rather than the default stance that, you're going to be skeptical about it. And I'm baffled as to why people take that stance for the supplement industry when it's blatantly there to make money off you. And it's just had such a bad sort of reputation over the last 20 years, just because that's all they're there for. They're there to make money off you from dubious products. So, I mean, another interesting thing is the majority of people who, maybe not majority, but a fair few people, a certain subset of people who really, really believe in the supplement industry, and believe in some of the more wacky things out there. Like, there's feet pads which people are using now to like pull toxins from their skin. So it's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. But it's basically a color changing fabric, essentially, that's put on your feet. And overnight, as you sweat, the pad sort of changes color from no color to then what it looks like to be something dirty. It looks like to be sort of muddy and soiled and stuff. And that's apparently the toxins coming out of your feet. It's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And people will trust that over like the pharmaceutical industry, trust that over doctors. Now, I'm not saying the pharmaceutical industry got all the answers, but at least the pharmaceutical industry has done things to help the world. Like, we don't have diseases that we had 100 years ago because big pharma has basically eliminated those. We have a much higher quality of food and products now because the processes that we use to farm have fixed them. Not saying those are perfect, but there have been actual tangible benefits. And certainly when you look at sort of diseases which were common 100 years ago, we've all but wiped those out now, thanks to vaccines and stuff like that. So you can say what you like about the big, the pharmaceutical industry, and perhaps sure a lot of people are making a lot of money off it. But the bottom line is there have been some tangible benefits. Now, when you look at the supplement industry for the last 20, 30 years, there's been fuck all, basically. And they've just ripped a lot of people of a lot of money. So it baffles me when I get these comments, like the latest one of CBD oil, when people are actually defending it and taking the stance that, well, it's got to be good for something, right? I mean, I even heard someone say to me once that BCAAs give them a buzz. It's just the most ridiculous thing I've heard in my life. I mean, it's not even on the label that BCAAs are supposed to give you a buzz. So it never ceases to surprise me. So anyway, talked a little bit about why I'm so suspicious of the supplement industry, sort of the 4-step process and why it thrives, and why some people trust the supplement industry over the pharmaceutical industry. Now, what I wanted to do was share with you, because this podcast is supposed to be about placebo effect. I wanted to share with you a couple of articles to do with the placebo effect and just emphasize how powerful they are. So these articles, these studies were brought to my attention about 3 years ago from my coach, Chess Rockwell. And they're from a summary by Greg Nuckols. So that's kind of how I've heard of them. So the first one, here we go. The first one is from Magnaris, Konstantinos, Collins, David Sharp, and Martin, 2000. It's entitled "Expectancy Effects and Strength Training: Do Steroids Make a Difference?" Now, I've got a summary which Greg wrote. I'm going to go through this and just talk you through it. So in this one, the researchers were in a perfect position to study the placebo effect. The researchers were coaching a powerlifting team, and 11 members of the powerlifting team have asked their coaches about using steroids. Presumably, they trust their coaches. So when the coaches told the lifters they were providing them with fast-acting steroids, the lifters were like, great, and they bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Their coaches actually gave them sugar pills, telling them they were steroids. Then they maxed out on the squat, bench, and deadlift. Now, before I tell you what happened, it's important to note that these guys were all nationally ranked powerlifters. They were beasts. Like they weren't your average guy on the street, has a good session here, has a bad session there. These guys were going at it hard. They wanted it. Average body weight was roughly 85 kilos. Maxes were about 250 squat, just over 200 bench, and 260 deadlift. I'm assuming this was done in gear, powerlifting suits. But regardless, they were strong. When they maxed thinking they were on steroids, every single one of them hit PRs between 5 to 12.5 to even more on their lifts. After that, they trained for 2 more weeks, continuing to think they were on steroids. And during that time, they all said they had great sessions. They were lifting more weights for more reps, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Then they were told to max again. However, before they did that, the researchers put a twist on it. 6 of them were allowed to continue believing they were on steroids. 5 of them were told they'd been on a placebo the entire time. And this is what gets really interesting. The group that continued to believe they were on steroids, and they maxed, and they all achieved pretty much the same level as they did 2 weeks ago. So they maintained that level of effort within 2 weeks. The group that were informed they'd been on placebo the entire time, they absolutely tanked. They could not replicate the maxes that they did 2 weeks prior, even when they knew full well when they did those maxes, they weren't on steroids. So they knew the entire time they were on placebo. And they made those lifts, those big lifts, while they were natural. But they still couldn't replicate it. How crazy is that? So that one study gives you an insight into just how powerful the placebo effect is. These guys were told they were on steroids. They did perform so much better. Then they were told they were never on steroids, and they just could never replicate that level of performance. It's amazing how powerful the mind is. There's a second article here as well, and this one's probably more interesting. So the researchers told 15 trained athletes they could get their hands on some free steroids. These guys were decently strong. They had like 3-plate squat and bench, roughly 2-plate press. They trained for 7 weeks with the promise that whoever made the best strength gains in 7 weeks would get these free steroids. So the guys trained natural for 7 weeks, and they added some poundage onto their PRs for the bench, press, and the squat. Then 6 of the participants were selected at random to take part in the steroid trial. They were told they'd be given some Dianabol, so to say oral steroid. They trained for another 4 weeks thinking they were on drugs. In just 4 weeks, they put a combined total of 100 pounds on those same 4 lifts. So 100 pounds instead of 22 in 4 weeks instead of 7, simply because they thought they were on steroids. Now that is the power of placebo. So if we sum this all up, you have a supplement industry who is designed to pull money from you, who's designed to make money from you by feeding you a whole bunch of advertising with sponsors, ambassadors, and everything, telling you that this new product, which they can sell to you for a low fee of £50 to £100 per month, is going to be the key to your strength, your mass, your leanness, your inflammation levels, God knows what else. That's what the supplement industry is telling you. Us on the one hand. On the second hand, you have the human body, the power of placebo, of the human mind, which can make you add lots to your lifts, which can make you believe that you're performing at a better level than you are, which can make you believe and feel pretty much everything. So when you get an effect from this supplement because you believe in it, and you're going to believe in it because you're monetarily involved, like no one spends £50 on CBD oil if they're like, well, I don't really think it's going to work, but I just feel like wasting £50 today. No one's going to do that, right? If you're monetarily involved, you're going to, and then the product is there for £50 to £100 or whatever it is, and you spend that amount of money on it, odds are you're spending that amount of money on it, believing it's going to do something, right? I think we can all agree on that. So whether it actually has an effect or not, at that stage, because you believe in it so much, because you're monetarily involved, the placebo effect kicks into gear, and there we have it. That is how the supplement industry thrives, and that is how they are ripping you off. And I wanted to say it like that, ripping you off, because I want to emphasize that that's what they're doing. They're making money off you for supplements which are provably useless. So going back to my original point, this is why my default stance on new supplements is to be skeptical. Not to be, oh, great, research is fantastic. XYZ bodybuilder promotes it as well. Let's buy it because he's an honest guy. He may well be an honest guy, but he's not immune to the power of placebo either. Okay, so I'm not saying that all the ambassadors are full of shit and all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is that people are prone to placebo. That's basically how and why the supplement industry thrives. And that's why I'm generally so skeptical of supplements. So the ones which I feel have got some sort of value is protein, creatine, and caffeine's pretty good. But aside from that, there just isn't enough robust research on the majority of other things to indicate that they actually do something other than give you a placebo effect. So you might argue, well, okay, Faz, they might not actually do anything, but I feel they do, so I'm going to carry on doing it. And that's a reasonable argument to make, I guess. Like if you're happy spending, money like £50 to £100 or £200 on a supplement which isn't really doing anything, but you're going to take it because you kind of believe it will give you a placebo effect, then fine. If you're morally okay with that, that's okay. If you can justify that in your head, that's absolutely fine. I would say there's probably better things to do with that money. Like, I'm assuming, Phil Heath isn't listening to this for tips from Fazlifts on how to improve his performance, but you're just you're listening, you're the average guy or girl on the street, you've got a partner, possibly family, pets, all that kind of stuff. I would say a more useful use of your money is probably something like go book all of you guys into a spa for the weekend. Perhaps you and your spouse go get some massages. That's definitely going to have a difference. The big difference is hire yourself a coach. If you're young, you don't have time to waste, hire yourself a coach. Take advantage, soak up all that experience that your coach has so you don't have to waste that time in the years that count. That's a good one to do. Go out for dinner, do something like that. Just go out for dinner more often, an extra once or twice a month because you've saved that money. Or frankly, just to give you the peace of mind, just put the money in the bank. So you could argue, sure, that even with the placebo effect, it's useful, but I would say, look, instead of just sitting there spending money on crap and being happy to be fooled and happy to be in the dark just because you get a performance effect, why don't you do something with the money that's actually going to give you a performance effect, like get a massage, go out for dinner, go to a spa, have a nice relaxing weekend away, something along those lines, stuff which is going to make an actual difference. That's my argument. Right. I think I've covered pretty much everything. So why I'm so suspicious of the supplement industry, why you should be too. 4-step process to why supplement industry thrives, and then talking through these very powerful placebo studies. And there's a ton out there. If you just look on PubMed for placebo studies, there's a ton out there. And hopefully that's impressed upon you the point that you shouldn't, your default stance for new supplements should be one of skepticism and not one of trusting the obvious sort of claims that people are giving, no matter how trustworthy the ambassadors for this new product are. Right. I am going to call it there. This is actually the second time filming this. I filmed it the first time, it didn't record. It sucks. I did this with bullet points actually for the first time ever. I'm hoping it made a difference. I'm hoping it made it better. I'd be interested to hear what people have to say about that. So yeah, that's my little take on the placebo effect. Hopefully that was useful. I'm going to go upload this now, and yeah, I'll see you all next time.